finally, we're ready to start our webinar. First of all, I'd like to thank our guest speaker, Jessica Goret, for taking out time for the webinar, and yeah, and for this and for her valuable time. So thank you so much, Jessica, again for joining us today. And I'd like to get started with your introduction. So it'll be great if you can share a little bit about your education background, your professional experience, and your journey until now.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here and share my experiences so far. So, my name is Jessica Gourdet. I am 28 years old and I'm a management consultant with Accenture. And so, just a little bit about me, my academic background. I went to Spelman College here in Atlanta. It's an all women's, historically Black college. And I studied psychology as my major and then minored in Spanish. And then I graduated in 2013. So after that, I spent a year abroad. I taught English in China. I was an English teacher in northeastern China for about a year. So that was quite an adventure. And so after that, I came back to the States and I started to work on digital social media marketing through an internship that I found online. And later on, I found that I had a knack for marketing. These were primarily with small businesses that needed assistance. And after doing that, well, while I was doing that, I ended up getting into a program at Duke University, Fuqua School of Business, where I went for a 10-month program and I got my Master of Management Studies, which is kind of like, it's sort of like an MBA for those who don't have the qualifications for an MBA, since I didn't have the professional experience at the time. So I was able to learn a lot. You take a lot of the core MBA classes and a few of the electives. And from there, I was recruited to work for Accenture based off my experience that I've had abroad with people and with marketing and social media. I fit the role to become a management consultant. So that's where I was recruited, and I've been working for them for about 3 years now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jessica. And it's great to know that you're a Blue Devil as well. I went to Duke as well. I'm not sure if I shared it earlier or not.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, I went to Pratt School for my MEM, so that's great to know. And I've taken a couple of courses in Fuqua School as well. So great to have you.
Yes.
Awesome. So, Jessica, what is management consulting according to you?
So, according to me, management consulting is really helping solve a problem and taking on the tasks that lead up to the final solution. So, management consultants, we are the ones that, come in when a business is having a problem or they need some sense of innovation or they're looking to start a project. And what we do is we lay out all of the steps, we lay out the potential risks, and we lay out the timeline. And then a few of us will perform the work while a few of us will manage the work. And that's where you get the management consultant part from.
Got it. So, what's your typical day as a management consultant?
Okay, so my typical day as a management consultant, it differs based on whether or not I am on a local project or I am on a traveling project. I was on a traveling project, so I can give you that because that's the most interesting day. So it typically starts on a Monday. I am up by 4:30. I get ready, get dressed, and I head in an Uber or a car at 5:30 to catch my 7:25 flight. And then I head out to the client site. So the client that I've been working on is in Washington, D.C. area. So I'll head out there. And the second I land, I hop in a rental car and then I drive to the client site. And I usually make it there by about 9:30, 10 o'clock latest. So immediately upon getting there, I normally start a meeting. I usually have a 10 o'clock meeting, an 11 o'clock meeting, and this is when I'm client facing. So since I'm at the client site, we'll probably sit in a big conference room or we'll join via Skype. So we'll go through our meetings and we'll discuss what work needs to get completed for the day and for the week. After that, we'll have lunch, which typically your whole team sits together and have lunch. And then afterwards, I'm expected, I usually work from 1 to 5 p.m. Depending on the deadline and the rigor of the work, we probably will go until 6 or 7. And then we'll all head to dinner together, or I might get dinner at the hotel. Just depends how I feel on a Monday. You're usually exhausted. Jet lag is very real. So, um, and then I'll head to the hotel, check in, eat dinner, and then I'll usually hit the gym because the gym helps you keep energized and maintain balance. So I'll hit the gym and then I'll spend some time at the end of the day preparing for the next morning, or I'll watch a few movies. And I try to be in bed sleeping by 11 so I can wake up for the next day. So
Great, awesome. So I assume like you are traveling almost every other week. So how's it traveling as a consultant? Is it tiring? Is it fun? What's it according to you?
So, as a consultant, traveling is, well, it's kind of double-edged sword. On one way, it is fun because you get to travel. Like if you are someone who doesn't mind planes, who doesn't mind driving and sleeping in hotels, it's not that bad. Um, Also, if you're young, like I am, and you don't really have much of a commitment, it makes it easier. So I find traveling fun. And what they do is most of them have some sort of flexible traveling. So what that is that twice in the month, instead of going home, you can use the amount of the ticket to go home to go somewhere else. So for me, the ticket from DC back here to Atlanta is a few $100s, so I can use that to go maybe to Mexico. I went to Canada. I'll go to New York. You can go down to pretty much anywhere because it's usually a good amount of money that you get to spend. So that is very helpful because it helps take your mind off of all the work and you get to visit new places. I would say on the downside though, traveling really does wear out the body. Jet lag is real because you are literally on a minimum of 2 flights every week. So the first week and actually the first month is very hard because you're just tired. You're not used to being up at 4:30 and you don't get to nap. You're up at 4:30 and you go straight to the client site and you're working until about 8, 9 p.m. So it does get tiring, especially when your flight is delayed. Maybe there's some like crazy thunderstorm and the airport has to shut down and you end up having to spend the night. That's happened to me. So um, I would say if you are young, free spirited, and you like to travel and you want to do fun things and you want to visit other cities, traveling can be very fun. But just you got to find your balance because you get really, really tired. So,
Hmm. So all consultants' life are equally almost same because I've worked as a consultant with Big Four, Deloitte and PwC for a couple of years, and I can imagine staying on airports like delayed flights and all, but it's fun. Cool. And okay, Jessica, my next question is, so what are the roles and responsibilities of a management consultant? For example, if I talk about technology consulting, we had to interview our client to get the information, and then we had to interact with our development team, make them understand what needs to be built, what's not required, and then we prepare the whole technology solution and present it to the client. So, what exactly involves as the roles and responsibilities of a management consultant?
so that's actually kind of similar to what you just described, except it just kind of depends on what industry you're working in. So I am a commercial management consultant, and the other that you can do is federal, where you actually like work for government and high profile clients where you have to like do a background check. That's another level of consulting. And as you mentioned, technology consulting, you're working on a tech case. I worked on a tech case and I worked on a commercial case where I was on in the corporate finance department, and I was working on an acquisition. So my job was directly related to making sure all of the data from the target company translated over correctly to the acquirer. And so as that is I guess the gist of what my job includes is that I have to work with the strategy team. So the people that come up with the solution, or the people that work directly on the solution, I would have to work with them to make sure I understand what's going on. So that's one thing. As a management consultant, you have to be knowledgeable about the entire project, and you have to be knowledgeable about where you fit in. Um, Secondly, you have to make sure that you are open to receiving criticism, because you have to build a lot of things. You're building tons of PowerPoints. You're writing notes down. You're making legible copies of those notes, the meeting minutes. You're preparing meetings. So you're scheduling the meetings. You're attending the meetings. You'll probably lead. I've had to lead meetings every week. That's what I usually have done. You pretty much have to be very flexible with your personality and whatnot, because there are some people that prefer to just kind of work by themselves and don't really like to be micromanaged. And then there are some people who work in big groups and you're constantly being faced with the client. So another role would be listening to the needs and to the risks and what can be done to improve the work that you're doing. It really just all depends on the client. And last but not least, after working with the people who have the solution, after working on the solution, after preparing the solution, you have to deliver the solution. And not only do you have to deliver that, you have to be open to the feedback from the client and be ready to change anything at any given moment. So pretty much your roles are whatever the difficulty, the problem is, and whatever the solution is and how to get there, I would say.
Great. So it's like the whole life cycle, right? Right from
Pre-
identifying a problem and then working through it and finally coming up to the recommendation.
Precisely. Yes.
Great. Perfect. So, Jessica, there are a lot of candidates, both recent graduates and people with background like yourself, right, who have involved in some other careers. Now they are interested in transitioning to management consulting. So, what would you suggest? How to break into management consulting?
I would say the best way to break into management consulting is to first identify why you want to become a consultant. There are many industries, there are many different types of clients, and there are many types of jobs, roles that you can hold as a consultant. So though I am overall a management consultant, on a project, I may be a project manager. And that requires me to use my leadership skills and my communication skills to ensure that my team gets everything done by deadline, and that I, accurately and truthfully communicate that over to the client. So I think you should think about what interests you. I enjoy retail industry. The client I've been working on is, part of the hospitality, travel industry. Look at what industry you like, and then also think about the type of work that you are most comfortable with doing and that you are best at doing. If you are very good at coding, then look into tech and try to find a position where you're actually doing the coding work, or you're learning about doing the coding. And I would say leverage the work that you've done in your past jobs to push yourself into a segment that will either build on those skills or give you the skills you want to do. So for example, if you were teaching like I was at one point and you want to get into consulting, well, part of teaching is you have to create plans, and you have to teach, you have to lead a group of students, and then you have to take the feedback and based off of the lessons, the cooperation, whether or not the content was easy for the children to understand. That's something that I would take, and to transform that into management consulting. Now as a project manager, I would have to outline an entire lesson, I guess, um, that I pass on to the client. And so with that, I found that my strength was managing. And so that's when I would use a few of the roles and characteristics of my job as a teacher to put that on the forefront and push me into a position where I can excel and build on my skills as a project manager. So that's a personal example. And I think that that's what you should do. Just kind of think about what you want to do with consulting, which one of your strengths can be used and can be kind of magnified and built upon, or which ones you don't want to do, and then kind of avoid that and select your industry.
Great. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of competition out in the market today, right? For any type of job, not just for management consulting, but management consulting, I would say it's even more competitive, right? Because of
Yes.
the demand and definitely a great career scope. So, what's the best job search strategy that you adopted, or you would recommend to anyone to adopt at this point?
So the first one is it's kind of not what you know, it's who you know. If you can display, that you are someone who exemplifies like commitment, who is steadfast, who is reliable, who is like kind of just profound, you have a presence that people can trust you and what you're saying. You know that you have professional skills. Your presence is professional. It makes it easier for you to get into consulting because those are a few of the traits that you need. And if I see that as, a consultant from a colleague or someone that I used to go to school with or someone from a previous job, I'm more likely to refer you to a company that I'm working for, and I will also give you a recommendation as well. So I think you should befriend those who are consultants, or have consulting experience, and get that one-on-one mentoring coaching from them, and then kind of ask their opinion, like, where do you think I would fit in? Also, I think you should do research on all of the companies that you want to work for. I work for Accenture, and so sometimes when I'm at the client site, I'm sitting in a room with people from Ernst& Young or EY. I'm sitting with Deloitte, and then I'm also sitting with other smaller boutique firms. So it really depends on what type of firm you would want to work for. Mine has over 400,000 employees worldwide. Like, we have branches in like almost every country, the biggest countries. So I know Accenture is kind of pushing, its way globally, and it's doing a great job. But then there are some people who would prefer a boutique firm where you're not really traveling. You can make it home every night by 6, and you have probably 200 employees of which you guys all know each other. So I think if you distinguish from what type of environment and culture that you want to work for, it would make it easier for you to kind of land that job, because if you have the drive that would work best in a small team setting, I would say look at your boutique firms, and they're probably hiring. And then you can also find people that work there on LinkedIn, and maybe you have a mutual connection. Someone can make an introduction, or you can, professionally approach them and say, hi, I am interested in management consulting, and I've seen what you've done. And last but not least, I think you should look at the commitment of that company to the community, like their corporate citizenship. And I say this because a lot of the companies end up doing volunteer work. Like, I know here at Accenture, we'll do lots of volunteer work in the Atlanta area with another company that I know. And I also happen to be friends with the volunteer coordinator for this company. So I'll go down and I know the type of projects that Accenture is working on. And because of that, I'm like, okay, this is something that I could see myself wanting to do. So I see how Accenture gives back to the environment and to, its communities. And that's what drew me to the company. So I think those are three major things that you should look at.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jessica. And I think it was a wonderful, wonderful answer, and it's applicable for everyone, not just for management consulting. Networking is definitely key for everything. When nothing is working, do networking.
Precisely. Yes.
Awesome. Cool. So, Jessica, what three tips would you recommend to make your resume stand out for a management consultant position?
Sure. So one of the tips would definitely have to be to pull out your leadership experiences, and you should do that by adding a numerical value to everything that you've done. So, instead of saying like, I volunteered with this group and we went on a mission to another country, it would be better if you were to rewrite that and say, I volunteered or I pioneered with a group of 10 other college students, or, you know, medical students, study, whoever, whatever it may be. I went with a group of 10 students over to a third world country, and we were able to feed 200,000 refugees. I added numbers, so it kind of shows the magnitude of what you've been able to work with and how many people you've been able to impact, because consultants, we have a large impact. We help our clients make an impact. So that's number one, add numbers to your resume. Number two, I would say definitely add those experiences that you don't think really matter. For example, they may just seem small to you, but they can actually be pretty big to the company you're about to work for. For example, I mentor at-risk youth at a nearby school system, and two of them, what our job is to prepare them senior year to help get them into college. And so it's only two girls that I mentor, and I didn't think it was that big of a deal because I do a few other things. But because of that, it shows that you're committed to a project to see it all the way through. So I'm working with these girls from the summer after junior year all the way until they get their college acceptance. You may have a project that stems, they're usually minimum 3 months. And I've been on my project for about 2 years. So they see that you have commitment and you can follow something all the way through. And then third, I think that you should highlight an interest outside of work. So I say this because it shows that you have more than, you know, what your academic demonstration is, or what your professional experience is. Because as a consultant, as I mentioned, you do a lot of work. You do a lot of work, and one way to make sure that it just doesn't get to you is to have a great work-life balance. And so one thing I do, I mentioned the gym. So for me, bodybuilding was something that I got into. I found it was very fun. Lifting weights just provides so much euphoria to me. And so that's something I truly enjoy doing. And so I mentioned that, you know, and that kind of shows something different, because it's like, what? Oh, girl, you like to go to the gym? That's crazy. Can you teach us some things? You know, it's those type of things that are also topic conversation starters. You tend to have dinners with your clients, lunches with your team. When you are working so hard, you don't want to talk about work over food and drinks. I promise you, you don't want to. So what is it about you that makes you different from everyone else, you know? And you'd be quite delighted to see that everyone has kind of that little unique, interesting fact about them. And it also shows that you are not all about your work. So those are my 3 tips: just adding numbers, um, pulling out experiences that aren't professional and academic, and then also highlighting your hobbies that make you unique.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jessica. And I totally agree with you. I wish I could follow your gym schedule, because I always make plans, but then when work comes, I somehow miss my schedule. But I totally appreciate it. That's really important when you're working for like 8 or 10 hours on a regular basis. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yes.
Cool. So, from your experience, Jessica, what are the 2 to 3 key skills that you think that are really, really important for every management consultant to have?
Sure. So the first one is patience. What we do is we derive a solution and we help implement that solution. That does not happen overnight. There are many factors, there are indicators that come into play that influence every single solution, every single outcome, and every risk and problem. You need to be patient, because a project may go over longer than it should. A meeting that was supposed to be 30 minutes ends up having to be 5 hours over the course of 1 hour increments for the next 3 weeks, 5 weeks. Your project may say that, you know, you're supposed to be here for 3 months, and then 6 months, and then a 1 year project turns into 2 years. And I've seen that happen. And it's like, you really need to be patient, because when you come into it with a patient mindset, any type of surprise won't phase you. You won't grow tired and you won't be upset. You're just kind of like, okay, well, I factored in that, you know, it's going to take longer. And another one I would say is to be empathetic, because we are the experts. Everyone calls on us to provide our expertise. So we're constantly researching. We know what to do. If they knew what to do, they wouldn't be calling us. So we know what to do. And sometimes it can be quite intimidating for them, or it could be like they probably don't trust you right away. You need to be able to view what you are delivering to the client from their perspective. So if they see a PowerPoint slide where you're delivering a message and you think it is very coherent, to them they may have so many questions, and you may be wondering, how do you have a question? Like, this slide clearly says everything that you need to know, but you have to remember you're an expert. So you think it looks great, but these people have no idea what you're talking about, or you're trying to convince them that your solution is right. So you need to be empathetic, and when they're asking questions, or when you're creating the content, think of the questions that they may have, so that you can be prepared to respond to them. So empathy is the second one. And then I would say the third one is to be outgoing. So I would say I'm an outgoing person, but I have my limit. So I think after about 10 hours of being in front of people, I need to be alone. And the thing is, when you are in front of a client or when you're with your team, you can't just kind of be standoffish. You can't be quiet. At a dinner, if we're doing a game where everyone goes around and announces themselves, you have to, put on a smile, and you have to be relatable. You have to be personable. You have to be charming, because people are trusting you with their business to come up with a way to help them. And if you seem like you're unapproachable, closed off, like, they're not going to want to talk to you, and then they're not going to want to trust you. And then that's something that everyone notices. So if we're at a big dinner and everyone's having a good old time, drinking, talking, getting to know each other, and you're in the corner just not talking to anybody, you're on your phone, you don't want to get involved, you don't want to play the table game, they notice that. And then that can look like, well, she doesn't really care, or she or he doesn't really want to be here. You never want to give that off. You have to be open, and then when it's time to shut down, take that time to yourself. Because when I'm in the hotel by myself, that's when I just kind of release, and I'm like, oh, let me recharge for the next day. So that's the third one. So I say patience, empathy, and charming.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jessica. And I totally love that point when you said, like, after working for 8 to 10 hours, you just wanted to be alone. And that actually happened with me because there was there was a team dinner every other day, and I was like, I've been I've been with you for almost 10 to 12 hours now. Now I don't
Yeah.
want to be with you guys. But yeah, definitely when you're with your client, you have to be very, very involved, right?
Yes.
And vibrant so that they can relate it to you. So totally agree with you. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Of course.
Awesome. So my next question is, what is the interview format of a management consulting position? I mean, in terms of, are there any technical rounds or behavioral interviews, or how many number of interviews are there?
Sure. So I went through, when I think about it, it's like 4 interviews. So the first interview is the general interview that you have in the beginning, where they kind of see who you are, get to know you, ask you questions about your resume. This is the interview that is directly after you give in the application and they call you back. So this is a time where you read up on the company, you kind of see, some of their metrics, some of their facts. And this is when you really talk to the recruiter about what you would like to do and your future goals. And this is typically like a 30-minute interview. After that interview, you kind of get pushed on. I was invited then to a second round interview. This second round interview typically is kind of like an observational one. We were asked to go to a dinner, and we had a few executives, managing directors, senior managers from the company join us for dinner. And this is where they want to see how you can interact in public, on behalf of the company and in front of the client. So we were at a dinner, which is something that you will more than likely do when you are working on a client. And They're kind of observing what is the conversation you're bringing to the table. How do you respond to questions? Are you, just as I mentioned in the last response, are you standoffish? Are you on your phone, or are you asking questions about work? How do you conduct yourself? So after that interview, which I think is a very smart interview to have, after that one, I was then invited back for the case interview. So this is like, I guess you can say it is behavioral. It just all depends on what the firm would like to present to you. And they give you a problem. And with that problem, they look at how you analyze the details and the descriptions that was given to you, and what you prioritize, what you see is the most pertinent information, and then the type of solution you derive from it. So some people will need a pencil, they'll use paper and pencil, and they'll write down like a chart. They'll write down like an issue tree. Some will highlight a few numbers. It really just depends on how your mind works. So with this interview, I'd say it's really important. Some people really, really prepare. There's this book called Cracking the Case that a lot of my colleagues would read. And then some people didn't really prepare too much for the case interview, because you've kind of done a few of these type of projects in the real world. And that's kind of where I was, because I was doing, the social media marketing, and it was kind of consulting at the time, but I didn't know. So when the case came in front of me, it was just like another case that I'd seen all the time that I've been working on. Um, I would suggest studying, kind of looking at different cases, because they look to see what you identify first. And there's really no right or wrong answer. It's just what you see is most important, and they're looking to see how the wheels in your brain turn. And then the final interview is kind of where they discuss what your life would be like in Accenture. That's when they talk about, your benefits. That's when they talk about what are the expectations. So they'll say, are you willing to travel? And here are the perks of traveling. Here are some people you can talk to see, how their life is traveling. Which office would you want to be in geographically? What are your salary expectations? The final interview is where you get to ask questions. They'll present to you how amazing the company is, and you get to ask, is this will this fit my needs? Can I lead a happy life with this, and etc. That's usually also the confirmation interview. So if you're getting a call back after the case and they want to speak to you some more, you can probably guess that they would like to offer you a position. So I had 4 different interviews before I was asked to come on.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I'd like to add to the case round or to any other round when interviewers when I gave my case round of interview, my interviewer asked me so many questions. I was like, is he trying to like grill me? But then I realized that he was just trying to see how I behave in a pressure situation. If I was able to like calmly answer his questions, or I was like losing my patience. So that is again very important.
Mhm.
Cool. Thank you so much, Jessica. So my next question is, what are 4 to 5 common and challenging interview questions that you have encountered or that you would recommend for management consulting positions? Maybe you have encountered in these questions in any of these 4 rounds that you have just mentioned.
Sure. So the first one would probably be, so from the first round, this is when they were kind of just asking about my interview. One of the questions was about my previous work experience, and this may be different from everyone else, but as I mentioned, I did the marketing and I kind of was doing consulting on my own. And they asked me to tell them about a time where one of my experiences was able to produce tangible results. So that is a little bit difficult, because you have to kind of quantify your impact, and you have to speak to how it has positively and negatively impacted. So this is going to be a chance, well, they will ask you a question, and maybe you don't want to go back to that job, you don't want to think about that situation, but you have to kind of spin it and show how it both has positively and negatively impacted you. And Just a quick example, when I was working on my social media marketing, I was managing a few influencers that were popular on Instagram. And it was difficult because I would bridge a few campaigns to the influencers, or the models as we would call them. And at times, we would secure a deal and they're like, okay, we're going to market your product. But then I'd go to the model and she didn't answer the phone all weekend, and she wasn't responding to emails all weekend. The communication wasn't there, or they didn't want to do it. And it's like, I've already promised something to the client in this case, and the person to execute it is nowhere to be found. How am I going to fix this? That's something that's a little alarming, that you would not want to. It's kind of like, oh, I don't want to mention that in an interview where I'm trying to be a consultant. But then it showed how I overcame adversity. So I was able to spin that around because they asked about that clearly on my resume. So you're going to have to answer questions you don't want to answer up front. And trust me, they read your resume. Don't think they just kind of skimmed it. They have questions. So the second interview, this one was when I was at the dinner. They asked what my future career goals are. So this is a typical question, but when you are face to face with someone who has put in several years, I mean like 10 plus years into a company, and they're seeing you that you're very young. In fact, I believe one of them started working for Accenture the year that I was born. So so it was like, oh, back in the 90s, like he asked what my career goals were, and I was like, oh, I don't know what to tell you because you knew your life, and I was in the crib. I didn't even know how to speak yet. So there also, it showed, that he was clearly of a different generation, and me being a millennial, there's an imbalance. They really want to see where my mind was. So for me to just say, well, I want to be a senior manager, that's too open ended. I had to come up with, my future career goal is to excel in the form of a project manager. And I want to be able to manage 8 to 9 projects at the same time. See, that was more defined, and that's something that's attainable. And that's something that someone such as him asked me, and I was able to respond to, and he can measure that as well, because he's like, oh, I know what it's like to manage more than one project. So don't say I want to be the best consultant there is. That's too open-ended. Define that some more. The third interview, the case, oh my goodness. The case interview was always a little frightening because you don't know what the right answer is. And then at times there's no right answer. They just really want to see how you're moving. So I think the most, like, I guess, challenging part was, my case was asking about, for really quickly, a company had many call centers, and they were losing a lot of revenue. They weren't making much profit, and they were trying to cut down on a few expenses. So you can either say a solution is to cut how many call centers we have, or add more so that they're there 24 hours, so that if customers are calling, they always have somebody to speak to. You see, those are two answers that work, but you have to figure out which one is the best answer. So at first I started to say, well, you know what, you can add more call centers. And the person interviewing was like, more? And so I'm like, oh my gosh, that question was hard. Him just saying more was hard, because now I have to kind of show you my thoughts. I have to explain to you why this would be the best answer. And there is no final answer. I ended up switching my mind. And I was like, actually, no, how about we instead of 200 call centers, let's have 8. And they can all be somewhere in a country overnight where we're awake, or something like that, and time zones. And so I fixed it up and I changed it. But I would say for that one, the hardest question is explaining why your answer can work. And then the final one, so this would be like my fourth, would be with the final interview where they're kind of telling me about my life at Accenture. A difficult question that they were asked was, what is your expectation? And so This is difficult because we are all different in our personalities, in what we hope to get out of this, and what our work life balance wants to be. And consultants, we, depending on your tier, depending on how many years you put in, you can make a very good salary with bonuses. And then, but for some people, that's not what they put on a pedestal. They want to make sure that, they can come home to their family every week, every night. And then you have other people who care more about, well, I want to make sure I'm coding all day. So it's like, that's a difficult question because you never want to offend the company you're working for. I think at one point I was like, I make sure my health is always tip top shape. So are the benefits exemplary so that I can make sure if I'm sick, like I can head to the doctor like right away? And they were like, yes, yes, yes. But you see, that's a difficult question to answer because you don't want to offend someone and say like, do you guys actually have good benefits? You know what I mean? Like it can come off as too pushy or offensive. So what are your expectations as working part of this company, as a citizen and employee of this company in general? Is a different, it could be a difficult question to respond to.
Hmm. I totally agree. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Jessica. And again, like I've seen, like some of the candidates ask, like, "Oh, what is the maybe the salary range or the benefits?" And again, this question was basically to assess your requirements from the position, right, or from the company. So it's
Yes.
actually you're asking the same question in a different manner.
Precisely. Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. And Jessica, what resources would you recommend in terms of books, websites, or the blogs to prepare for management consulting interviews? I remember you already mentioned the case
Cracking the
competition,
case. Yes.
cracking the case, yeah. But what are
Yeah.
the other potential resources that one can use to prepare for management consulting interviews?
Sure. So I would say, believe it or not, Google. I would Google and I would go to the different firms and see what research they've done and published. I say this because, I have a colleague who had to do something for strategy, and present it to, a board that she was trying to become work for. And with me being a consultant, she was able to look up something Accenture published about the product that she was looking to do, either the product or the industry. So part of remaining a top tier firm and remaining an expert is to constantly be doing research. And so within our portals, after becoming an employee, we use Harvard Business Review. We have lots of just economical, we'll use Bloomberg, we'll use Business Insider, wherever we can find credible research to back up our claims and to further our expertise. That's where we search for. And so what I would say is that, at times I had to do a company profile, while I was in business school. We were able to find statistics and facts from visiting, EY's blog. And we were able to look, Deloitte had a lot of facts as well. Google these consulting firms, look at the research they produce, or look for their scholarly articles that show, that talk about the claims, about the products, about the industries, the industry research, so that it's kind of like you're using their evidence in the interview, which is great because they're like, oh, you read. So how impressive would it be if you had an interview where they're asking you questions about, you know, Uber, or they're asking you about like ride sharing, and you actually had information from an article that they published with the results for ride sharing trends for the next 10 years. That would put you ahead of the game, and then it would also make you during your interview make it easier to answer the question. Yes.
Yep, thank you so much. And I don't think nothing can be better than if you give a reference of their own article or their own result or their own publications, right?
Yes.
Uh, cool. Somebody gave me a very cool advice that before you go for an interview, just go through all the recent news and updates related to that company, and you'll be able to find some really good information that you can just pitch in the topic during your interview and the conversation. Thank you so much.
Precisely.
Cool. So, Jessica, my next question is around strategy consulting. I've
Sure.
seen a lot of candidates getting confused between management consulting and strategy consulting. So, according to you, what's the exact difference between management consulting and strategy consulting?
I would say the difference between strategy and management consulting is really if you look into the name. Strategy consulting are usually the first consultants on the ground when it comes to the clients, and they will deliver all of the problems, all of the factors that contribute to the problem. And the strategists literally strategize several solutions that would work. So they look at everything and kind of form, here are a few blueprints, if you will, of what you can possibly do and what can possibly happen. This allows the client to select, maybe this is our budget and this is, how much time we have to implement. Let's go with strategy B or strategy C. um, Strategists, the consultants, they do a lot of research as well into the industry, and they literally form the different options that you can select. So they are experts when it comes to doing research, putting together comparisons, and giving you the option to select as the client which one would fit best with you. Strategists will do that, and once you've selected, their job is pretty much over. Kind of, but mostly over. That's when they'll hand it over to a management consultant. So once the strategy is completed, so I can actually give you an example because we had to do something like this. So let's say there is a newspaper. There is a newspaper who used to be number one in the industry and had the most readers. However, with the ever growing and changing economy and the trends in technology, most people are reading news on their phone. So they're not picking up and buying newspapers. And this person usually, this company would print newspapers every day. So they need a solution because they're losing how many people are reading. It's not about how much money they're making. They want to continue to have more engagement. They want more people to read their content. So they tell this to the strategy consultant, and the strategy consultant will say, well, here is why the market is changing. There is a disruption, and that involves technology and cell phones. And people have newsletters, which they'll directly send emails to people every morning. So while some people need to wake up at 5 to go get a paper, there are some people who by 5:30, they already have the paper in their inbox. So they'll give you, that's one solution. You can make a newsletter, you can make a TV blast, you can do something with the radio. They'll give you the solutions that you can choose, and they'll tell you why things are the way that they are. The management consultant then will come in, and let's say the client said, well, I want to have a newsletter that's digitally like sent out every morning. The management consultant will come in and make sure the project is seen to fruition. So that's when they'll say, all right, the first thing we need, what are your capabilities here? Do you even have a method of technology that can allow you to send out emails? Great. We have a delivery team that will actually build the prototype. Next, the project manager, this is something I would do. I would say we need about 2 months to build a prototype. We need 3 meetings every week to discuss a few things. We need this information. We need it by the end of August so that we can start this launch in October. And then this is the team that we have. This is how many people we have. And this is how it's going to go. And we've also put in a few weeks in case we fall off deadline. So the management consultants typically have a team of people that will perform the work. They'll do the analysis, they'll build the prototype, and then they'll make sure everything goes to fruition. So if there are questions, comments, concerns, meetings, conferences, the management consultants are putting it together to reinforce the solution and to ensure that it's brought all the way out to the end. So they manage the project. Whew, I think that's a good explanation.
That is a perfect answer. Even after working with Deloitte and PwC as a tech consultant for many years, even I had a confusion. What's the actual difference? But I've worked with both the teams, but more or less, I saw like a lot of overlap between these two areas. But
Mhm.
thank you so much. This example clarified it a lot. Thank you so much. Cool.
Okay.
So I have a quick follow-up question on this thing. So it seems like both are working on mostly a non-technical side, right? So is there any difference in the interview process, or is it exactly the same as the management consulting interview?
So I would say the difference is, so with management consulting, you never just have one interview. You have the first interview to see if you are just kind of working, able bodied, personality, outgoing, everything I described to get into the firm. If you're reliable, if you possess the credentials, the academic achievement, the volunteer, the professional work, you're getting into the firm. Once you're a part of the firm, you have to decide, what industry or what roles you want. So there are some people, if you are technology oriented, you would interview for a role that requires some technological capabilities. So I would never personally interview for a role to be a coder, but I may interview to be a project manager on a technology project, because what I would do is keep the deadlines and keep the whole team moving, but I wouldn't necessarily perform the work. So if you are someone that is into technology, great, get into the firm first. And then once you're on there, they'll probably need someone to do back end work. They'll need someone to, build the prototype, to test. Oh my gosh, testing is large. They'll need someone to test it, look for the kinks, for the bugs, all of that. That's something you can do once you're past, the initial starting point and once you're into the firm. So definitely, yes.
Hmm. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And as we are reaching almost to the top of the hour, I'll take like last few questions. So what's the career path of a management consultant? I mean, what's the starting point and where can a management consultant can lead his or her career to?
Sure. So you can actually come all the way up. I believe there's a certain level of managing director and then partner. So what you can do is you start out as like a first year analyst. Some may call they all the roles they call them different names based off the company. I'll just give you Accenture. You'll start off as your first year, and this is when you're hopping on projects and you're seeing how everything works, and you may be asked to do small administrative tasks. As you grow and demonstrate that you're able to take on more workload, you begin to grow eventually until you are promoted, and usually that takes about 1 to 2 years minimum for entry level analysts to become next level. And then you can be promoted to consultant. So the difference here is that consultants are more client facing. They're the ones having the conversations with the client, and just depends on the availability, the need, the region, the project, and what you are capable of doing. That's how you can move up in advance. um, After making to the consultant role where you are client facing but you still report to a few other people that are managing the projects, this takes about 3 years and you can move up into a manager position. And that manager is the one who delegates all the tasks of the project to the consultants. And they will communicate with the client, with the other managers of the client side. So the difference here is that as a consultant, you may have 1 to 2 to 3 projects that you're on, and you're working through them. And then as a manager, you're kind of leading those projects, or you're leading the teams that work under those projects, and you work more closely with the client. Um, as you move into senior manager or managing director, this is when you've done so much work that you are now like part of the liaison for the client industry to the firm. So you're very well knowledgeable on the industry. The client knows you well. You've performed lots of work. You've brought lots of tangible results. You've built up a relationship that can be sustainable for many, many years for the firm. And so that's when you become like a managing director. And then everything above that is really just based on how long you've been with the firm. So you can become a client account lead. So that means for the entire company of that client, you can be at the top, the lead for that for the firm. And then you can also finally move up when you have worked enough hours, when you've climbed up through the ranks. And if you are interested, you can actually have stake in the company. And this is more than just shares. You can actually be a partner of the company. And that's when you kind of sit up with the execs. That's when you're looking at regional decisions. That's when you're looking at decisions for the whole continent. Be like North America, depending on wherever you live. And so but that takes longer, more years and more expertise. So I'd say don't think about becoming partner until you've been in there for about like 15 years, between 12 to 15 years. And that just takes a lot more of who you know, recommendations, and your impact and your relationship with the client. So that's where you can lead. You can become partner of one of the big four companies.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And even I've never seen any partner who is below 50 or 45,
Yeah.
right? So at least like 20 years of experience is definitely required. Great. So, Jessica, my last question for today's webinar is, what are some major 2 to 3 challenges that you have faced as a management consultant and that you would advise candidates to be aware of and how they can handle it in a proper manner?
Sure. So I would say, oh wow, there are three of them. Let's see. The first one for me had to be, I had to learn how to relax a little bit more when it came to deadlines and to work. And I say this because with my work experience and just kind of like with my culture and my ethic, I'm very much, I will do what I say I'm going to do. I don't believe in letting people down. I don't believe in doing anything halfway. No, you need to be on point from the the moment you start working. You need to be dressed, you need to be on time, you need to be ready. And sometimes I can be too serious. So there were, times where I had to realize that, Jessica, life actually happens. For example, I was in a situation where I could not make it to work. And instead of, taking the day off, I still tried to attend meetings via my phone and hop in on Skype. And the major lesson I realized is that though you have a commitment to the client, you're still human, and basic human needs come first. It's okay to go to the doctor's office. In fact, please go to the doctor's office when you need to. Take that day off, that PTO. I remember working through the holidays because I really wanted our team to advance and be, where we needed to be before we headed into the new year. And it was like, Jessica, like, no, you need to take a few days off around Christmas. It's not that serious. So remember to put yourself first. Take care of yourself, okay? Go to the doctor when you need to. The second one is that you are working with people from different backgrounds, different cultures, and different work ethics. So you have to learn how to assimilate with them and to not offend them and to be respectful. So I say this because, there are people I work with all different demographics when I'm in that room. And I will have people in different countries. We'll have a major team in Philippines and in India, and they're doing back end work. So there's time differences. There are some people who are very much quantitative. They understand the numbers. They understand how to do problem solving and calculations and tech. That's them 100%. Me, I excel, though I'm okay with quantitative. I excel in qualitative. So I'm good with keeping, order, organization, writing, reading, making presentations. I'm really good at all of that. So at times you can definitely see frustration. You can see how teams can become dysfunctional if you have someone whose work ethic is, let's overpromise to the client because we want to make sure they know that we can do what we need to do, versus someone who's like, we're not going to overpromise. In fact, we're going to tell them we need 3 more days. So in case we don't get it done in time, we have enough time to work this through. So I'd like to give like a quick example. We were doing accounting for my client on the finance department, and as the manager, I saw that there were large variances. Basically, certain countries and provinces, they owed several hundred millions of dollars. Their accounting wasn't right. And I remember I had to call Asia, the whole continent, and go through each country and ask them, what do your books say? Because our books, our ledger says you owe us 20 million or 200 million, and you're only coming up with 130 million. Where's the rest? So though that may seem like that's Jessica, that's your work, I had to be mindful that I'm calling China, and I'm telling China, which everyone knows, like, they do very well with math and science. So I'm calling you to tell you, you guys didn't do your accounting wrong. Me in America, I'm calling you early in the morning to tell you you owe me $70 million, and your auditors just were not right. You have to learn how to phrase that to not offend people, because that's a whole different culture. Though it was a different country, I had to make sure, and thankfully I lived in China, so I knew how to communicate that. But what if you're not in China? You may have someone of a different country sitting with you in the boardroom. You need to be mindful of their culture, their ethic, and be respectful so that you can work cohesively as a team. And I would say the last challenge, I guess, to overcome really was being able to be open when you're talking to a bunch of people over a client dinner. As we mentioned, you get really tired. And at times you just kind of don't want to play anymore. Or maybe you don't drink alcohol. There was a time I was training for a competition, and everyone was having wine and champagne, and I could not drink because I was training. So, everyone's passing around and they're toasting, and I'm like, how can I have the energy and stamina and still respectfully show everyone that, like, I like you guys, cool, and I'm happy to be here, but I can't participate, because you can lose points if you don't show up for bowling, or if you show up but you don't bowl. You have to still maintain some energy and find a way to respectfully let everyone know that you're still here, but you just kind of don't want to participate right now. So that's what I would say.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Jessica, for all your answers, your insights, and sharing your experience. I must say it was very, very thorough, very informative, and it's very, very useful for all management consulting aspirants.
Hmm.
So I thank you so much again for your time and for sharing your answers with so much energy. I totally appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I'm always here to help. I'm happy to help.
Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for joining us today on this webinar. This webinar recording will soon be available on High Counselor channel. If you have any questions from Jessica, feel free to let us know and we'll pass it on to her. Thank you so much, Jessica, again for your time.
Thank you, Aditya. We'll
Thank you.
talk
Have a
soon.
wonderful evening. Yeah,
You
bye.
too. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.